Appropriation Act, known as FOIA. However, language approved by the Governor and the General Assembly in Chapter 56 of the 2020 Special Session Act 1 Acts of Assembly allow us to move forward with certain restrictions that I will outline below. Before I review those provisions, please let me take a moment to review how this meeting will work. We want to allow for participation by board members, staff, and members of the public who wish to comment. However, it is essential that we are able to manage the conversation effectively. I am chairing this meeting today from the DCR offices in downtown Richmond. I have with me Christine Watson-Jones, Blair Gordon, and Michael Fletcher. They will assist with presentations, responding to comments, and the overall coordination of the meeting. Please be patient with all of us as we work through this. We understand and appreciate the challenges. Chapter 56 of the 2020 Special Session Number 1 Acts of the Assembly, also known as the Budget Bill, include language addressing the ability of public bodies to conduct electronic meetings without the need for a forum being presented in a single physical location, defined as an electronic meeting. The Budget Bill allows public bodies to hold electronic meetings when the Governor has declared a state of emergency pursuant to Virginia Code 44-146-.17. which states, if the nature of the declared emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the public body or governing board to assemble in a single location, the purpose of the meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required of or necessary to conduct operations of the public body and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities, subsection 4-0.01 Gulf. The Budget Bill also has language regarding recordings and transcriptions of electronic meetings. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded. This recording will be available to the public through the DCR website. The comments in the chat room will also be preserved as a public record. Official minutes of this meeting will be drafted and posted in accordance with regular procedures. The Budget Bill does not allow the board to hold electronic meetings to discuss or transact business for any purpose. Rather, they may do so as long as the agenda items that the public body plans to take up are A, statutorily required, and B, necessary to continue operations and discharge the lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is the board's responsibility to determine whether the nature of the declared emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the public body or governing board to assemble in a single location. At the conclusion of my remarks, I will ask for a motion for the board to make this determination. If that motion fails, this electronic meeting will end at that point. The Budget Bill requires compliance with the provisions of codes 2.2-3708.2. Therefore, in accordance with 2.2-3708.2-Delta.2, public bodies must include a telephone number that may be used to notify the public body of any interruption in the telephonic or video broadcast of the meeting. In the event that a disturbance occurs, participants should contact Mr. Fletcher by phone or text at 804-317-8934. That number will be put in the chat box. Additionally, if there is an interruption in broadcast, the meeting must be suspended until the public access is restored. Those provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act are addressed by the Budget Bill remain in effect. Before we continue with the business portion of the meeting, I will ask Mr. Fletcher to call the roll for the board members and anticipated staff. Other participants will be recorded through the chat window. If you are participating by phone and your name is not called, please call or text Mr. Fletcher at 804-317-8934. In addition, if at any time you lose connection or are unable to reconnect, please contact Mr. Fletcher at the same number. I will now tell Mr. Fletcher to call the roll.
Mr. Arneson.
Here.
Mr. Albritton. Ms. Sankey-Blanc.
Here.
Dr. O'Brien. Dr. O'Brien did indicate she will be late. We'll be here. Ms. Mason.
Here.
Mr. Wilson.
Here.
Mr. Newton.
Yeah, present.
Ms. Mayberry,
Here.
Mr. Ford.
I've heard from Mr. Ford that he has received his second COVID shot this morning and he'll be on in a few minutes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, you do have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay. The recommended motion is the Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Board certifies that the nature of the declared COVID-19 emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for the board to assemble in a single location, and further that the agenda items to be taken up at this meeting are necessary to continue operations and discharge lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities of the board. That is the motion.
So moved by Adam Wilson.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Pam Mason.
I have a motion and second. We will take the roll on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Those opposed, no.
Be a roll call.
Huh?
All right, go ahead.
Oh, that's a roll call.
Yes, sir.
We don't have to vote on the roll call. That's the motion.
Right.
Okay. So we do the roll call?
We did. We're good. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. All those in favor say yes. Those opposed, no.
But I need to call the roll.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir. Sorry about that. Mr. Arneson.
Yes.
Ms. Saki-Blanc.
Yes.
Dr. O'Brien. Not here yet. Ms. Mason.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Newton.
Yes.
Ms. Mayberry.
Yes.
And Mr. Ford. Still not here. Okay. But, Mr. Chairman, the motion does carry.
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion. I'll get this all down by the time it's over. I want to explain further how we will handle participation by board members, staff, and the public. Everyone except the individual presenting material for an agenda item will be muted. Once the presentation is completed, the board members and only the board members will be unmuted for discussion. Michael, Christine, and Blair will assist me with ensuring board members are recognized and that when they have questions or comments. As needed, staff will be unmuted to address questions and concerns. Members of the public will be able to ask questions and provide input by utilizing the chat box function only. As time allows, we will respond to those questions and comments. We will now proceed with the business of the board as outlined in the agenda. The first agenda item is the approval of the minutes of the March 16 board meeting.
Mr. Chair, Charles Newton, I'd like to move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Adam Wilson, second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded that we approve the minutes as submitted. All those in favor signify by saying yes. Those opposed, no. Mr. Fletcher, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Arneson.
Yes.
Ms. Saki-Blanc.
Yes.
Ms. Mason.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Newton.
Yes.
Ms. Mayberry.
I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Mr. Chairman, the motion does carry.
Thank you. Next order of business is Director's report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and all of our guests. It's nice to see so many people joining us online here. I will keep my report rather brief, but some very good news. At last meeting, you will recall I reported to you the increases that the General Assembly made to the Virginia Agricultural Cost Share Program. Today, as before, the business before you is reviewing the policies for the allocations of the funding. Something rather historic happened this session, and I can't remember, and I'm a little wonky with General Assembly since I worked there for 12 years, but first time I can remember this happening, the governor returned the budget bill, and he signed it that he approved the purpose of the bill, but was asking for 18 amendments. And because the General Assembly unanimously, well, not unanimously, but because the General Assembly approved all 18 of the amendments, that means that the bill has already become law. Normally we have to wait for it to be re-enrolled and sent back to the governor to be signed. So that's really good news, because we're always a little concerned in our May meeting to make sure that you have to have that bill effective before you can actually allocate the funds. So the bill is now effective. It is law. And there were no changes made to what I reported to you at your last meeting. So as you go through the allocation, both for the district admin and operations funding, as well as the technical assistance and of course, the VAX funding, as you'll be reviewing the policies. And so the good news is that at your May meeting, you will have a chapter reference number that you will be able to award those funds for the fiscal year 22. So that's really good news. And just again, summarizing, it was a pretty banner year, given all of the challenges that we faced, but we're going to have a very robust cost share program moving into fiscal year 22. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will conclude my remarks. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, but keep the meeting moving along.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Director. Are there any questions specifically for the director right now? Hearing none, we'll move on. We have the Audit Subcommittee report. Adam, are you available?
All right, thank you, Mr. Arneson, or Chairman Arneson. Christine, you can chime in where you want to. I will say the longest part of our meeting was probably the approval to have the electronic meeting. And I'm with you, Mr. Arneson. That's a lot to go through and a lot to read. And I know we all hope that one day we'll get back into having in-person meetings, so we don't have to go through all that at the very beginning of the meeting. But would like to say our sub-audit committee was very short this morning. The audits were in, and there was not, there were just a few little small things with a few different districts across the state. We did approve a letter to send to those, nothing major. I'd like to applaud all the districts across the state for doing such a good job of keeping track of all their records, especially during these difficult times of not being in the office and then being in the office and then out of the office again. I know it's been a headache, but they have done a tremendous job this year, and would like to applaud each and every district for the hard work that they've done. Other than that, we'll meet again in September. So that is my audit subcommittee report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Moving on, the next order of business is the approval of the board's fiscal year 2022 VAX BMP manual, which we reviewed and discussed last month.
Correct.
So the motion that is proposed is the following. The Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Board approves the 2022 Virginia Agricultural Cost Share BMP manual as presented. The department is authorized to make non-substantive changes to include formatting, stylistic changes as necessary to all approved sections of the manual. That is the motion. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Pam. I move that motion.
Thank you. I have the motion. Do I have a second?
This is Charles Newton. I gladly second that motion.
Thank you. Now, the chair and the floor is open to discussion. Does anybody have any further comments on the manual? Hearing none, I will ask Michael to call the roll on the motion.
Mr. Arneson,
Yes.
Ms. Saki-Blanc,
Yes.
Ms. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton,
Yes.
Ms. Mabry,
Yes.
Mr. Ford.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item F. This is not for a vote today, but a review of the board policy on the funding allocations, the administration and operation funding allocations for fiscal year 2022. Christine, is that yours?
It is mine. There were no change. There are no changes to district allocations for admin and operations funding this year from last year. There are some revisions. Many of them are just technical, such as amending the date references from FY 2021 to FY 22, changing the dates for some of the reports to, instead of referencing 2020, to reference 2021. There is a revised references to the 2021 Appropriation Act and the language that is in that act. Before May, I will insert the appropriate chapter number. That it remains blank at the moment. There are some significant changes to this, but it is in reference to the $170,000 that the department gets to provide auditing training and some other support services for districts. Part of that, one of the things that we have done is shifting some funds to provide additional funding for the audits of districts. It has gone, we're recommending that it goes from $104,000 to $112,500. There are 24 audits that need to be completed this upcoming year. So that is a definite need to have more funds available for those audits. We're trying to address that. Another larger or more significant change is an increase or recommended increase in the amount of grant funds that go to the association. Currently, in this fiscal year, there's $46,700. We're recommending that for FY22, $51,000 be provided. Most of that increase reflects additional responsibilities on the part of the association to provide training to district staff, both technical and administrative. We have added some language about district to reference district staff trainings under the current policy. Most of the reference to training is actually for district directors, but over the last year, the association has done a tremendous job of hosting trainings, developing trainings that either DCR has requested, that district staff has requested. They've been highly attended, and in some ways it's far more efficient to have them handle some of those trainings and the coordination of it than to have individual agencies do it. So we've also included the requirement to provide training for district director remains, as does the requirement to assist with district-led committees, such as the marketing committee, the admin and ops committee, the education committee. There's also provision in here that would allow the association to contract with professional or professional services. Trainings must be a part of that. But that also would allow the association to have a CPA come in and provide financial records management and development of budget assistance to districts, or have an HR professional come in and provide assistance and revise the personnel manual. Additionally, I believe the hope would be that those professionals would also be on retainer with a certain amount of hours allotted to them, which would allow districts to have access to those professional services as they need them.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Christine to pause for a moment, and I just want to echo what Christine said. I know that Dr. Tyree is on, I believe that President France is on, but you know, during this difficult time and being able to provide so much of the necessary training and whatnot, as Christine alluded to. The association has really stepped up and helped us to very efficiently fill what would otherwise have been a void. And I think this very modest increase in the grant to the association is probably a pretty darn good deal for us. So I just wanted to recognize and thank the association for all they have done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
In shifting some of those funds to, or in shifting some of the funds to the association along with the training responsibility, we have removed the requirement that the department provide those trainings. That does not mean that the department is not going to be heavily involved in many of the training opportunities that the association would provide. The trainings for the administrative staff, we have those. There's trainings coming up on budget template, financials, conservation planning classes. The department will still be heavily involved. And that is the last big change in that policy. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I have one question. Christine, the additional opportunity for spending money, districts to spend money on professional services, those would be professional services specifically related to admin and operations, right? So not related to like the VAX or VCAP actual cost share practice programs.
Correct. Those are, one, the association would have the contract, and two, they really are for statewide issues or concerns that district or the department have addressed. Auditing, financial management is always a concern across the state. There are always issues that pop up, whether some of it is QuickBooks training and some other things, especially as staff turns over in districts. HR is another big concern, especially as this year and COVID, and how do you work with staff that has been teleworking for a year? How do you handle your office management? Like, there could be some significant HR issues that are concerns that should be addressed, and it would be incredibly helpful to have an HR professional address those, and would also provide some consistency about the advice given to the districts across the state. But it will not be, those services will not be VCAP or cost share type services. Training, I would foresee for VAX and others.
So I have one follow-on. Thank you. I have one follow-on question, actually, which was about the training with the increase in potential funding there, which frankly is fabulous. But on the flip side, if we're still sort of in this digital space, what might happen if that money isn't able to actually be used, spent that way?
For admin and ops?
Right.
For the training budget, like by the association, this language has been reviewed by Dr. Tyree. Her board obviously is still reviewing it, I believe, and has will let me know if there are concerns, but to date, there has been no concerns about them not being able to spend this grant money on training.
All right. I mean, I know that traditionally some of this money that's spent on training involves travel, and if travel is not a thing, then things might, the need might shift a little bit. So that was why I asked the question. Thank you.
I think that would be more on the district level for the travel, rather than the association. Like the district is typically reimburses their staff for their travel. So if that was going to be, I think that would be where there would be an issue. But to date, I haven't had any concerns about it.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a comment. The association has been doing an incredible job of offering all kinds of training this past year or so, and all this virtual training does take time to organize and to get speakers lined up, and certainly the occasional need for a consultant or professional from outside the DCR or association. That's very reasonable amount of time, I believe, for the value that's been provided in the program.
Thank you. I echo those comments. Are there any other comments on the, we have some feedback. What is that?
Mr. Chairman, I was going to say, if everybody would please mute their line if you're not
Yeah,
speaking,
that's
we'll get feedback.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for staff on that? Of course, we'll review it, have time to chew it, and vote on it next month. The next item on the agenda is a review of the Administration Operating Support Grant Agreement for 2022. Christine, again.
You can. There are some changes to this grant agreement over last year, but they're not as many that I wouldn't call many of them substantial. There's some clarifying ones, and we've addressed some inconsistencies with the code for one of the training requirements. The revisions mostly include changing dates from FY 2021 to FY 2022, as well as referencing correct calendar dates. We've revised the references to the 2021 Appropriation Act where it was needed. What we have, I noticed one error. We have removed the requirement to complete the budget template, as it is an every other year deliverable. It should also be removed in the table. It's number 8. We will fix that before May. We've revised the training requirement for FOIA officers to every 2 years in response to a statutory change. We revised language related to new director orientation to remove dates that have passed. The language really was reflective of the COVID impacts and was a one-time consideration. We've revised the training requirements for records retention officers to require training the first year they're assigned they're designated the records retention officer, and every 3rd year thereafter. The training requirement is met through trainings provided by the Library of Virginia, which is mainly online training. And we've revised the training chart to remove the limitations on how trainings are provided and who may provide them. And those are the biggest changes to the grant agreement.
Okay. Are there any questions for staff?
I have a question. Christina, I understand that the training for the attachment D budget template will be done in May, and a good bit of the district's work on those things will be done in the current fiscal year, which ends at the end of June. But isn't the deadline for submission actually in July of 2021?
Yes, it's actually a condition of your current grant agreement. We will not require districts to complete one for this grant agreement that we're talking about.
But the actual submission is not due until the next grant agreement. So by stating it the way it was stated prior to the crossout, the red line, that it no later than July 15, 2021, it seems like it should remain in.
Mr. Newton, the attachment D has been folded into the same requirement as the end of year report for the current grant agreement. So all of your cash balance report, your carryover report, your final end of year attachment E and the attachment D budget template for this current grant cycle are all due July 15th.
Okay, all right, thanks for that explanation.
Okay, are there any other questions for staff? Again, we will review this and have this for vote next month. The next agenda item is H, review of the board policy, cost share and technical assistance funding allocations. Oh, this is wonderful news. Everybody's excited about all the money now.
All the money.
Christine.
Actually, aside from money, there are very few changes to the cost share and technical assistance policy that we're recommending this year. The total funding for SACs this year, which includes additional recordation revenues from FY20 and amounts that remained unobligated from FY 2021, equaled $73,770,964. Areas within the Chesapeake Bay watershed were allocated $52,344,130, and areas outside of the Bay were allocated $21,426,834. There are two key considerations that were made by the department that are reflected in these recommendations. One, no district was recommended for an allocation of more than $5 million in cost share funds for FY22. Additionally, allocations are recommended based in part on district's previous year's obligations and cost share funding requests. Some additional considerations related to the allocations included the availability of other funding sources, whether those were federal grants, such as the Most Effective Basin grant that just went out, whether there were settlement funds such as Mountain Valley Pipeline or DuPont. And then for areas outside of the Bay, we tried to target some areas where there are ongoing TMDL implementation plan projects underway to try and assist with the cleanup improvements for those areas. There was a total of $9,750,000 available for technical assistance. The base technical assistance amounts remain the same as last year. That's based on the Allocation Subcommittee recommendations and that were approved in December of 2019. Those technical assistance funds amounts will be reviewed and revised as needed based on the budget template information submitted by the districts in July. So those numbers will potentially change for FY23. Above the base level technical assistance funding, an additional $5,221,364 was available. Just to, some of the revisions that were included, obviously the date references from FY 2021 to FY 22, calendar date, revised the references to the 2021 Appropriation Act and the language in it. Again, the chapter has been left blank at this point. That will get fixed before May. The definition of agricultural land has been revised to reflect the updates to the VAX manuals that were just approved. We have removed reference to the SL6 backlog practices, as those practices needed to be complete by the end of this fiscal year. So that option is the time for that option has closed. We revised the participant cap amount to reflect the recommendation to updates to the VAX manual and updated the dates on the map. Although the HUC rankings remain the same, that will get changed again next year, FY 2023, based on the non-point source assessment that will be available either late this year or early next year.
Okay, are there any questions for staff? Who would have ever thought we would have to cap
$5 million.
$5 million? I mean, some years that was the whole budget. All right. We, of course, have that for review, and we'll vote on that. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, if I may, I just have one question. I'm just kind of curious. I was reviewing the February 2020 Virginia Agriculture Cost Share Funding Priorities Map, which I understand is related to the HUC units. And so I just find it interesting that somewhere in the middle part of Newport News, there is a high priority for cost share funding, and there isn't any real agriculture in Newport News. So I'm just curious. I assume that this really is just non-point source priorities, really not just ag non-point source priorities, right? It's page 16, figure 1.
Pamela, I'm going to venture a guess, and if we can see it on the map, that is probably the Newport News City Farm, where there's an agriculture operation. It's an old jail camp.
Okay, that was my one guess. Okay, so that might be the city farm. All right, thank you. It just, things like that get my attention.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay. Moving on, we have the cost share and technical assistance. Just the this is the, what's that?
The grant.
The grant. Okay, yeah, the grant agreement, which is item G. Nope, item H.
Again, very few changes to the grant agreement. Standard ones, amending the date references and calendar dates. We have included the conservation planning requirements in the list of administrative items that districts consider and comply with as outlined in the VAX manual. We included a requirement for the districts to submit district-approved average cost list before the district approves any cost share applications. That actually is in line with the language that was just approved in the VAX manual related to the average cost list. There is a requirement for district technical staff to attend annual VAX program updates. This is actually not a new requirement. The name change just more accurately reflects the training as it is. And it already happens annually, and districts are used to attending this update. We revised the language regarding secondary considerations to reflect what had previously been the existing requirement. It was revised slightly for this grant cycle in response to the COVID pandemic, and the language allowing the use of the previous year secondary considerations has been stricken. The last thing really are technical corrections, such as references made to DCR tracking application versus the conservation application suite, which is actually the correct term. But other than that, we've used the same training changes that are in the cost, that are in the admin and ops grant agreement. So those changes have been discussed, but again, we removed some information to avoid limiting who actually is presenting the trainings and how they are presented.
Okay. Are there any questions for staff? All right, moving on. We've gone through all the reviews of the documents that we're going to vote on next month. We're all the way up to item J. I'm behind the curve on this one here. I'll catch up by the end of the meeting. Okay, so item J is approval of the extension for renewal of conservation plan program certificates. Oh, these are planners.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is the first renewal cycle for this program. The conservation plan program that's run under DCR began on July 1, 2018. the certificates received under the program are effective for 3 years. In order to be eligible to renew the program certificate, an individual must achieve 30 contact hours of continued education and submit a conservation plan to the department for review and approval. Since the beginning of the program, 142 contact hours have been approved, with 57 contact hours approved last year. However, there are individuals who have not yet achieved the 30 contact hours, although their certificates are due to expire beginning in July. While we're not sure exactly why those contact hours weren't being achieved, it could just be as simple as this is a new program. People don't have in their mind that there is a contact hour requirement. Last year was stressful on everybody. This could be one of the things that slipped people's minds. We are discussing additional methods to inform individuals of upcoming certificate expirations and training opportunities. But in the meantime, we would like to offer a one-time extension for individuals to complete their contact hours. There are many online that people are eligible to take, many of them through NRCS, that they can take at any time and complete the hours.
Okay. Are there any questions for staff?
Kristen Saki-Blanc, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Does the department have a way to understand completely the individuals who have not yet achieved their hours, their level of activity in providing these services?
I don't actually know that we look to see how active they are. I think one of the department's goals has always been to make sure that at least one person in a district has achieved the conservation plan certification, because you need a conservation plan in part to receive or to be eligible for tax credits. Also, many BMPs require the conservation plan. So these individuals may not be heavily involved in conservation planning, but a lot of them are individuals that need to, when the moment arises, they need to be able to write the plan. So it may not be an everyday thing for them, but they still need the certification and the ability to do it. Also, some of this may roll into some other certifications.
And as a follow-up question, can I just ask too, thank you, Christine, where did the where did the request for this extension come from?
It actually came from one of our staff noticed that some of their district staff had not met the requirements.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christine, this is Kat Mabry. I'm sorry, I'm a little behind the curve on this. How many individuals are we talking about? You have the hours, but I'm not sure how many individuals that represent.
Daryl, do you remember? I could probably.
I don't recall how many there are, but Mr. Chairman, it's important to note that if we don't provide this extension, that these district employees have to start the conservation certification curriculum all over again from the beginning.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I also have a question about the way that we've been explained this. It says that only 57 contact hours have been approved in the past year. Does that really mean 57 individuals have been approved for completing their contact hours?
No, it really. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
40 contact hours are required every 3 years, correct?
A total of 30 contact hours are required over that 3-year period.
Per individual planner.
Correct.
Okay. So how could there have been only 57 contact hours for all of those planners?
Because each training offers a certain number of contact hours. So the cover crop and nutrient, an example, and I'm not sure I'll have the contact hours exactly correct. The nutrient management and cover crop training that the association just put on had two contact hours associated with it. So anybody who attended that class got 2 hours of contact hours towards their certification.
But what it's saying is, I mean, if we use it as described, that only 57 contact hours have been approved from all of those people, that's only enough for 2, not quite enough.
We don't approve the contact hours for a person. They just have to submit something. They just have to submit to us that they took that class. We approve the class, not the individual.
So, Mr. Newton, what we're saying is to receive your, to continue to be certified, you have to take 30 credit hours or contact hours over the course of 3 years. This past year alone, we offered staffers an opportunity to receive 57 credit hours. And so we offered, you know, more credit hours in 1 year than what's needed to be required for your completion of your certification.
Okay, so 57 contact hours were offered.
Yes.
That's not the number that were submitted as approved. Okay, yeah, it's
Right.
just the English didn't make sense to me. Now I'm starting to understand what you're telling us. And I certainly support the idea of providing the extension to see if we can't get all our planners updated.
So we're having fun with this one, but I have one question. Do we think 60 days is enough? Will there be enough offerings to potentially fill the gap for those folks that haven't yet achieved their contact training hours?
Yes, there are many online options that they can take at any time that are not required. Like they're not only offered certain times of the year, certain times of the day.
Okay.
There are numerous options.
Mr. Chairman, this is Adam Wilson. I'd like to make the motion that the Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Board approves a one-time extension for conservation planners whose certificates will expire in 2021. Extension of 60 days from the date of certificate expiration will be provided for a conservation planner to achieve the necessary contact hours, which is 30, and to submit a conservation plan for review by the department.
I second the motion. Kristen Saki-Blank.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, I will ask those. Go ahead.
Add that is there a plan to promote, not just offer it, but to promote it during that time period? And I'm all in favor of this too. I just wanted to, I mean, it seems like if we've had these on offer before and there was no uptake, that, you know, having 60 days and continuing to have them on offer may not change that. I'm assuming, you know, I'm all in favor of this and I'm assuming that's the plan, but just to, you know, I'm just assuming that there'll be some push for people to, you know, or to remind people that if they want the recertification, that they'll need to take these classes.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Marbury, all of these individuals, if you approve the extension, all these individuals will be notified that they need to follow up within 60 days of their existing expiration date.
Thank you very much.
That was the missing piece for me. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Is there
Sorry
Go ahead. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, I will ask Michael to call the roll.
Mr. Arneson,
Yes.
Mr. Albritton,
Yes.
Ms. Saki-Blank,
Yes.
Ms. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton,
Yes.
Ms. Mabry,
Yes.
Mr. Ford.
Yes.
Chairman, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. The next order of business is the approval of district appointments and resignations, which is item K on your agenda.
Yes, this month you all have an appointment of Mr. David Beals for Colonial District and the resignation for Mr. Umbarger with Evergreen.
Are there any questions for staff? The motion would be that the Soil and Water Conservation Board approves the appointments of the individuals being recommended. What is the board's pleasure?
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion. This is Pam Mason.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Charles Newton.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask Michael to call the roll.
Mr. Arneson,
Yes.
Mr. Albritton,
Yes.
Becky Blunt,
Yes.
Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton,
Yes.
Ms. Mabry,
Yes.
Mr. Ford.
Yes.
Chairman, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next item of business is the approval of the transfer of funds between projects, dam maintenance funds. Christine?
Yes. Culpeper has, Soil and Water Conservation District has requested in the Parks Department support this approach. Beautiful Run Dam number 4.
Damn.
Right? Had a project approved in December of 2019. It's for the design and construction of a primary conduit slip lining. The project was approved for $181,000. This project actually needs some additional permitting, and Culpeper District has requested that we transfer the funds from this project, number 4, and move it to Beautiful Run number 6, which is a similar project but does not need the VSMP permitting. This Beautiful Run number 6 already has some design elements that has been approved by the board as well. This really is just switching transferring the construction funds from one project to another. Both of these projects need to be complete, but after the permits have been acquired, funding will be provided for Beautiful Run number 4. Additionally, it has been a principle of the use of these funds that, to the extent we can, if there are projects within a district, we transfer them within the district as opposed to moving the funds out. That would hold true to this principle as well. Funds have been previously approved for the use of by Beautiful Run number 4. We have talked to the district. Those funds will need to be sent back prior to any funds being issued for Beautiful Run number 6, assuming the motion is approved.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Permitting seems to be a problem sometimes when it comes to dams.
Correct. I think they need to do an access road or something.
Yeah.
Something they weren't expecting.
Of course, we've had instances where landowners did the work before the approval of the permitting, and that gets hairy too. All right, the motion of Soil Water Conservation Board approves the transfer of funds for project Beautiful Run 4 to project Beautiful Run 6, up to $150,000, may be transferred from the two projects for the construction of primary conduit slip lining at Beautiful number 6. Any funds that have been previously provided to Culpeper Soil and Water Conservation District for the anticipated construction activities at Beautiful Run 4 shall be returned to the department prior to funding to provide the construction project for Beautiful Run 6. What is the pleasure of the board?
So moved as read by the chairman.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Adam Wilson, second.
Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, that's a beautiful motion.
Thank you. And I read it beautifully. I will now ask Michael to call the roll.
Mr. Arneson,
Yes.
Mr. Albritton,
Yes.
Ms. Saki Blanc,
Yes.
Ms. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton,
Yes.
Ms. Mabry, Mr. Ford.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. Is there any old business to come before the board? Hearing none, I will ask Christine, is there any new business to come before the board?
At the request of a board member, we've put on the agenda an item to try and address some concerns that have been raised about the increased cost of materials over the last year. Everybody should have received 2 letters that the department and the chair received. One from Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District and one from Shenandoah Valley. Over the course of the last year, several districts have raised concerns related to the increased cost of material. That was one of the primary reasons that the department developed the language related to the average cost list and the ability of districts to do a revision to that average cost, approved cost list once during the year in case material price jump again unexpectedly. The issue has been complicated, at least for the department in part, because there have been producers that have gone forward and installed and implemented practices regardless of the increased cost to themselves. Now the revised tax credit amounts will assist the producers in recouping some of that expenses, but we have been aware of that. Other producers have chosen to have designs reworked to try and bring the cost down. And the third issue has primarily been that even if districts were authorized to increase cost lists, they may actually not have the funds in FY21 that would allow them to pay the increased cost. So it has come down in some ways to an issue of fairness and equity across the state. The department does have a recommendation. It would apply, or all districts would be eligible to use it, and would be similar to how practice fails are handled by the VAX program. The motion's up on the screen. I hope y'all can read it. What we're recommending is that the board authorizes districts to provide additional cost share funding to producers to offset the increased cost of materials under the following conditions. Only contracts from FY20 and FY2021 that are not paid and are placed into carryover status going into FY2022 are eligible. Carryover contracts must be for the following types of practices. SL6N and SL6W and WP2s, those are livestock stream exclusion practices. The WP4s are the animal waste practices. So these really are your structural practices. The SL7, that's the extension of waterway, the water line.
Yeah, it's still construction.
So these really, it is very tailored to the construction structural practices that would be impacted by the increased material costs. Upon the district's adoption of a new increased average cost list for 22, the district would be eligible to utilize FY22 average cost list to make revised estimates to those contracts. And then the district, working in cooperation with their conservation district coordinator and data services staff, would be authorized to utilize as needed some of the funding provided in FY22 to offset the costs of those contracts that are in carryover status. The contract increases must be approved by the district board by way of formal motion and is recorded in the minutes. Districts are not authorized to provide additional FY21 VAX programs funds to address the exceeded incident costs developed in accordance with the district's cost list. Any FY21 program funds that remain unobligated at the end of the year must be returned to the department along with a proportional amount of technical assistance in accordance with the 21 cost share policy and the 21 cost share grant agreement. As I said, this really is the process we've used for practice failures. If a BMP fails 1 year, the producer is because of flood or whatever, the producer is eligible to come back to the district the next year and ask for funds again. Funds will be transferred back. So this process actually would be something that most districts would be familiar with. And still allows all the districts to participate if they choose to.
Okay, to continue with this, rather than have questions for staff now, what I would like is I would like someone to move and second the motion, and then we can have the discussion, because I know that some of the board members have requested time to speak. So if that's okay, I would ask at this time for the motion as presented.
This is Charles Newton. I'm willing to move that we adopt the agency recommendations for dealing with the economic dislocations and additional costs that have arisen, due to the pandemic.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Jay Ford.
Second.
Thank you. I know a lot of districts are having this problem now. Unfortunately, I just contracted to sell 153 acres of mature loblolly pine, and I got a very good price for it. So I realize at the other end that prices are going sky high. But Charles, would you like to speak to the motion?
I do not completely understand the details of how this will work out, but it does sound like a useful option. But what I'm curious about is there any way within this framework for the producer who completes a project, a 2021 project, structural project like mentioned in the fiscal year 21, did DCR's suggestion deal with that possibility, or is it only for the 21 projects that get carried over into 22?
It's for projects that haven't yet been paid. So there may be some flexibility on that. Additionally, really, the person is going to have to depend on the tax credit to offset their costs. Because the other problem we're up against, truthfully, is that it is now April. The program year ends in 2 months. So that's the other. It's a problem is timing.
Yeah. The other question I have is, do we need to take this action at this month's meeting, or can we have enough time to think about the impacts and vote on it at the May meeting?
You can. The problem then becomes the district staff having to turn around that carryover list by June 15th. That's right. Right, David?
Correct. The carryovers are going to have to be approved at the June board meeting, which will vary by district. But that gives a really tight turnaround if you approve at the May meeting.
Especially if you're updating a cost estimate for practices.
We'll have to.
Are there any other comments?
Yes, this is Kristen Seki-Blanc. I have a couple of questions. The departments note that this is about, that there's an acknowledgement of equity and fairness, the fact that there are some producers that have gotten these practices in the ground under the current cost, and also balancing that with making sure that the districts who've already gotten a lot of these producers lined up to do this work, that need to have a little bit of flexibility to have the increased cost of materials, that there's a balance there, and that so I guess I think that this proposal, I really appreciate the department working to have this proposal on the table, and the nuance of understanding, particularly in response to the two letters that we saw from Shenandoah and TJ Soil and Water Conservation, or Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District. Can you provide us a little bit more detail on what the trade-off is from what the districts have asked for versus what the department's able to put on the table with this proposal? That's question one. And then question two is that I need to understand a little bit more what number 5 means. I don't know enough about the language about what that means. But the first question is, can you tell us what is it that the districts are getting versus what are they not getting with this proposal? That's question one. And then question two, just a clarification on what number 5 means.
What districts are not getting, well, let me do this way. What they are getting. Under this proposal, participants would not have to cancel their contract under FY21 and reapply for funding in FY22. Since there is so much funding available in FY22, there's not necessarily a risk to the producer having to cancel a contract to re-sign up, especially since in FY22 the participant cap is increased to $150,000. However, it is an administrative burden. It is it takes time on the producer's end. It takes time on the district staff to cancel it in 1 year and put it in a next. What it does do for districts is it allows districts that have obligated all of their funds for FY21 who are still having producers are still being impacted by the increased cost of materials, will still allow them to assist their producers in FY22 if the producer is willing to wait. Whereas they can't do anything to help them in FY21 because they don't have any cost share funds available. So for districts who have obligated their money, this is a more fair approach because it gives them an option to be helpful as well. What it does not do, districts who have not obligated money in FY21 don't necessarily get to hold on to that money unless it is under contract. And then the district staff move it over into a carryover status, which allows more time for the producers to get bid estimates and construct designs and things like that.
And that was never, my impression is that wasn't the request or focus of the request that we had, right? That it was really for where they've obligated the funds to have a little bit more latitude in accommodating these increased costs from the supply chain. It wasn't for non-obligated funds. Is that right?
I'm not exactly sure how much of it was obligated versus unobligated. They were for existing contracts, yes. I think some of the difference is, and I don't know, I have not looked, if a district has FY21 funds existing, yes, it would make more sense potentially for that district to use those FY21 funds. However, there are many districts out there that don't have that option, and that's where we run up against the fairness problem. The other thing truly is that we have always held that the average cost list is approved once, so that all producers receive the same amount of money for those components. Allowing an increase halfway through or towards the end of a program year, either as a percentage base or an increased cost, does not treat producers fairly either. In fact, producers who were approved earlier in the year are not necessarily going to be eligible for the same cost. That's the other fairness problem even within a district, because the payment amounts are going to be so different. Although I guess then you could do the tax credit too. But you're also running into a time crunch on how fast can a district get this work done, get the carryovers in 2 months.
And I think that underscores why it's important for us to take some action on this today as opposed to putting it off until May. So thanks for reinforcing that. And then can you just quickly explain to me what number 5 means?
Sure. If a district does have unobligated FY21 funds at the end of the year, they're still going to need to turn them back in. They cannot use their FY21 funds to offset the costs or anticipated costs based on their FY22 approved cost list. It's an accounting issue, truthfully. So the timing, districts will approve their FY22 cost list before they start approving cost share applications in 22. Most of the districts will probably have them approved August, if by September at the absolute latest. Option is not that districts hold their FY21 money that long. At that point, funds should be returned if they're unobligated. We will allow FY22 funds to be moved back, for lack of a better way of putting it, to address the FY21 projects that need additional funding.
Mr. Chairman, this is Clyde here. Just a suggestion and to address Mr. Newton's concern, realizing that we're coming up with a rather quick response to something that just came to our attention and the issue that districts are facing, is you certainly could take action today, and then that way we have a plan forward, and should you need to maybe tweak it or amend it at the May meeting, you could always consider doing that if this doesn't quite meet the need. But I think that this is probably the best path forward that we have right now at this point.
Thank you very much, Clyde. I agree with you. We need to get on with it because costs are not coming down. Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Yes. Go ahead, Charles.
No, go ahead, Pam.
I was just gonna.
The only observation I might want to make, just thinking ahead, and I know that this is for this year and for costs approved for 2021. However, something that may also have increasing costs are practices that involve use of placement of sand, fill, and granite. So in other words, not just timber and gravel. So I'm just sort of trying to be mindful that, if we make sure that we're not being too limited on where the costs have gone up with regard to construction materials. So just, if we think this covers all of it, that's fine. But I just wanted to make that observation.
Yeah, in the short term, we're really addressing the structural practices that are going on now, and your point is valid. And those costs should be considered in the districts in their 2022 cost list. If
Agreed.
Like you said, granite and whatever goes up, that cost list, and it will be addressed. Now, I don't know if the market on stone is going up as fast as the market on timber, but I'll find out when I order my gravel for my waters on Friday. But yes, we will, that all costs related to the VAX will be considered. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And
Is there any?
yeah,
Go ahead.
Kristen, here, I want to just ask the department for some clarification as I read one of the district staff members' comment about construction that is underway now and the cost increases in construction underway. So this proposal does, is that what I guess I didn't realize that this proposal does not include projects that are already underway that are confronted with these increased costs. Is that?
I'm sorry. Yes, it actually does cover practices that are underway as long as they remain unpaid. So even if the construction phase is finished, as long as the district has not paid out those contracts, they can apply these increased cost estimates.
Okay, so and that's where the fairness thing comes in, because if it's already been paid out and a producer has already assumed the additional costs, there's no going back and reimbursing them for that additional cost.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on this motion?
Yeah, this is Charles Newton. I'll just say that we have encountered in past times when contract work, say for somebody in a very remote area of our district, exceeded the average cost list. And in those cases, we've always told our producers that they need to get competition, a minimum of three prices. Now, I don't know if other districts have that requirement, but it is a wise practice to make sure that the participants not just saying, "Oh, well, prices went up, and I picked the first bid that I could get, and that's why it was so expensive, and I paid it, so I must be reimbursed." Well, no, you need to show that you really tried to get competition and that was the best price you could achieve before we consider those extra costs.
Thank you. That's a good point. That means I can't do all my business with my brother-in-law.
Yeah. No.
Is there any?
The best price.
Mr. Chairman, just so you know, I'm getting 7 loads of gravel delivered today, and he's honoring the price he gave me 10 months ago. So the gravel doesn't seem, it seems like a lot of the gravel is transportation costs. Unfortunately, fuel is still down. So hopefully that will remain.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other comments? Yes.
I'll just follow on to what Kristen mentioned, that apparently there are some districts that have projects underway that they expect to pay out during this current fiscal year that have been affected by the cost increases, and that's a very challenging situation. I don't know the answer on how to deal with those, but it is something that hasn't been addressed by this proposal. Maybe they will wait until maybe the producers are in such shape that the official completion could end up being in July into the next fiscal year. I don't know what other options the district might have to try to promote the fairness of the situation that they're asking about.
I guess this proposal, though, and this is where I'm a little bit confused, doesn't number 3 put the onus of the timing for adoption of the FY 2022, cost on the districts? And so the districts, once the districts adopt it, wouldn't they be available, they'd have the ability to use it immediately, right?
Not in 21. They couldn't
Only
use
if it's carried over, but if it's carried over, they can. So if they haven't paid it, and you can get the districts to adopt and approve lists the first week of July, then they could pay against the new list.
Yes.
So I think that what it would be is it might be perceived unfair to folks that have been paid out as of, January, February of this year. But anybody at this point that's paying attention is going to say that they're going to sit on it until they get a new approved list.
That's
I'm
correct.
not sure how else to fix it.
Because it does sound like there's a concern that some producers would find it difficult to wait to get paid. So how soon are we thinking that the approved cost list could be out for FY22?
Each district creates their own average cost list, and it is approved by the district board. So it's up to the district as to how they can have it, available for use in July at the beginning of the program year.
So might I suggest a process wherein perhaps the association can bridge some of this information, wherein the districts that have already raised attention that maybe there's some regionality here and that we can use some shared information that's already been learned, and perhaps that would help districts move quicker in developing their cost lists.
Districts already have in place very specific processes for how they develop their own cost list. Some of them do talk amongst themselves, especially regionally, because there are districts where, contractors might work in 3 or 4 different districts, depending on their county territory. So you do see some similarities in some districts communicating amongst each other. But there can be some big differences, even in bordering counties and bordering differences in contractor prices and just costs of what's available at your local farm supply store. So we've looked into doing regional processes in the past, and it has not been a favored process by anyone.
Things change.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other questions or for staff or comments on this motion?
I'm just looking at the chat as we talk, and so I'll just keep bringing stuff up that comes up there, if that's okay. So someone is asking, is it possible to make this proposal effective immediately to address projects that will be finished in FY21? So it sounds like there's some urgency about time in general.
The problem then becomes the districts who do not have money in FY21, even if they wanted to help their producers, are absolutely unable to. That's not fair. It's also not fair to the producers who have already gone ahead and paid extra is not the right word by any means, but have paid higher costs to get their projects done. To be completely frank, I don't think this proposal fixes everything. I don't think there is any proposal that will balance these concerns out. This is the most fair, equitable way we can address this concern this late in a program year.
Okay,
I guess I'm
yeah.
100% sure I'm balancing, or maybe it's just because I'm not understanding the fairness issue as much, but are we empowered to, I do feel like this whole situation is such an extreme year with the pandemic that making some exceptions for people to be able to pay their producers doesn't seem that maybe you're getting feedback that's really different, that that fairness is the #1 concern. It seems to me that people paying their producers would be the #1 concern. And allowing people, if we are empowered to do that, allowing people to use some of their FY22 funds in order to do that would be maybe on balance a little more important than absolute strict fairness during a pandemic. That's just, my personal feeling, and maybe other people don't share that. It seems like Yeah, so I'm just sharing that. If there's a way that they can borrow some funding to be able to pay people, I would personally, that would be a reasonable. The extreme.
So even if you have FY21 funds available, or you could transfer between districts, which yes is allowable, you still have in place your FY21 cost list. You don't have a mechanism in which to base a new cost estimate off of yet, which would not, your new cost estimate wouldn't apply until FY22. So even if you have funds available, you don't have a mechanism in place right now to create a new cost estimate.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that those that speak identify themselves, please?
Sorry, that's Blair Gordon, DCR.
Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, I will ask Michael to call the roll on the proposed motion.
Mr. Arneson,
Yes.
Mr. Albritton,
Yes.
Ms. Sackey-Blanc,
Yes.
Dr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Mason,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Newton, Mr. Newton,
I unmuted, yes.
Ms. Mayberry,
Yes.
Mr. Ford.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the motion carries.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone. I know this is a tough issue, and it's a real-time solution. We can visit it again in our May meeting if we find some, extenuating circumstances or anomalies in what we've done. But for the people in the field, I appreciate the board doing this because we can get on with doing what we do best, which is obligate the funds. Is there any, next thing is public comment? Anything?
I don't have anything.
Okay. All right, our next meeting is,
If I may, Mr. Chair, I was pausing to see if there was any public comment. Since I'm on the board, I'm not officially the public. I did want to make a couple comments. Now, my first comment is, given the large funding that we have coming into 2022 to support conservation practices, I would like to suggest to VCR that we really strongly consider efforts to improve our numbers on wetlands restoration and creation. As a signatory to the Bay Program, the Bay Program at large has only achieved 11% of its wetlands goal. I understand its repairing goal is equally bad, but I'm not as directly related to that, so I can't speak to it officially. Maybe Kristen wants to. But I would love to see some of those numbers actually going into wetland restoration and creation. And I know that some of the in the VAX manual and some of the elements we produced or approved today speak specifically to that. On that point, as a follow-on, I would also like to encourage consideration of the cost efficiency factor and how habitat restoration practices actually would be rated in the cost efficiency factors, because it's not nearly as attractive to get, so much load reduction on an acre for $60 as it would cost, hundreds of thousands to restore a wetland. And so wherein habitat projects are often, well, always probably more expensive, I want to make sure that we are using the proper decision tools, prioritization, and rating factors that will help us promote habitat conservation practices, at least from a perspective of, especially given the co-benefits of many of the habitat practices. So they do wetlands, but they do lots of other things in the conservation space. And so I would really like to have us sort of tackle some of those issues moving forward.
Thank you. Very germane comments. Anything else? Well, hearing none, as I said, the May 20th meeting will be at 10 o'clock?
Yes.
10 o'clock. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. This is Pam Mason.
Second,
Thank you.
Charles Newton.
I don't think we need a roll call. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for your time today, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff for all the effort.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.